All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for July 18th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask everyone in the audience to please mute your cell phones or other electronic devices. And I'll ask our village manager to do a roll call for attendance.
Thank you. Trustee Dahlman?
Here.
Trustee Albinson?
Here.
Trustee Dearborn?
Here.
Trustee Apatow? Here. Trustee Orsick is absent at the moment. Trustee Handler?
Here.
President Rins.
Here. Trustee Dearborn has provided the required notice that he is unable to attend tonight's meeting due to work obligations. Our rules provide that Trustee Dearborn may participate remotely unless two-thirds of the board objects. Is there any objection? Seeing none, Trustee Dearborn may now participate remotely fully in the meeting, and the minutes should so reflect. Item 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll lead us this evening in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 3 is the quorum check. Rob, you want to go ahead and check quorums?
Yes, thank you. Month of August, August 1st, regular meeting. Any conflicts?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And August 8th is proposed to be canceled, study session, and then August 15th, regular meeting. August 15th, look good? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Item 4 is public comment. This is the time of the evening where anybody who wishes to may address Village Council on any matter that is not on the agenda. So if you're here to talk about the lakefront ordinances or the property on Asbury or any of the other things that are in the agenda, now is not the time to speak. If you want to talk to us about anything else, come on up and share your thoughts with us. Everybody's here for a reason tonight, okay. Oh, somebody did raise their hand? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up, Christina. There is somebody from Buckton.
Christina Cotto. I just wanted to ask if it would be possible, as a private citizen, to use this amazing space for the Park District meetings, because the Park District meetings have been difficult for everyone to hear. So I offer that question for your consideration.
Thank you. I would just say, please ask John to give me a call and we can work out details.
Would it be possible to move Bob like a foot to the left so Tina and I are able to see?
Bob,
the
move
podium?
over to the left about a foot, will you?
No, we're kidding.
That's better.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I can't see the speaker.
Perfect.
Can you just
Thank
twist them a little bit? Not
Oh,
twist a little to the right, Bob.
too much glare.
All right, I think we're good. Awesome. Okay. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close that portion of the public comment section and move on to reports. Trustees, we'll start down with Rob. Any report, Rob?
No report.
Bridget? Kim?
A quick report. Last night, the Landmark Preservation Committee held their meeting, and for the first time, I guess with this relatively new ordinance, they approved a 20% GFA bonus for a lovely home built in 1895 over on Elm Street that they are preserving and restoring. So it was a very nice discussion, and it's exciting to see people taking advantage of that option that we've given them.
Great. I also understand you talked about some student representation.
Oh, yes, I was going to repeat it. Yes, the Landmark Commission was excited to proceed with creating a student, non-voting student position on the Landmark Commission. There's also one particular young man who right now is very interested in doing that and has been to every meeting for the Landmark Commission for the last year.
Wow.
So I think he has certainly shown his dedication and interest in the topic and does seem to do a lot of research on the older homes in our community. So we're going to proceed with that. I know I wrote an email today, and hopefully he will be serving by September.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm excited for that.
Thanks, Kim. Bob, do you have anything?
No report, Chris.
Kirk?
No report.
And Tina?
No report.
Okay, village attorney,
No report tonight.
village manager,
No report this evening.
and village president. I have one short report. Rob and I were able to go on a tour of the golf course improvements with Rick Jacobson, who is the architect for the project. And folks, all I can tell you is with the reconfiguration that he's doing out there, it is going to be one different and amazing golf course when it's complete. It is just fantastic to see the way this man thinks about his craft and then puts it into play out in the field. We have the bonus of Rick being out there upwards of 3-4 days a week, physically directing the various placements of grasses and mounds and all sorts of things. And it's just amazing to see somebody with that kind of skill at work out there. And it's going to be to our benefit soon. Hopefully that course will be opening up in another year, and we'll all be able to enjoy it. But anyway, it's good to see that the stormwater project, that we're now starting to see some of the other public benefits coming forth, as well as the fact that Nutrien is now working on reconfiguring their fields as well, which we facilitated with the work on Duke Childs Field. So good news on that front. All right, item 6 is presentations. We've got a couple this evening. The first one is the annual comprehensive financial report, which we get every time around this year, and the popular annual financial report as well. Council will be reviewing final accounting for the fiscal year and will be provided with a summary of the village's overall financial condition. And our finance director, Tim Sloth, is here to review.
Good evening. Thank you. Presented for your review is the village's annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2022, otherwise known as the audit. The main focus of an audit is to provide the village's financial stakeholders reasonable assurance that our financial statements are accurate and complete. With me is the village's accounting manager, Del Duckworth, who was integral in compiling the audit, as well as Ron Amon, who is here from the auditing firm Lauterbach and Amon. Before turning over to Ron, I did want to cover a few items of note regarding the audit. First, the audit is prepared in accordance with the high standards of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and the village received the Governmental Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. The Certificate of Achievement program recognizes local governments that go above and beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles and prepare the annual comprehensive financial report in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. As in prior years, we do expect to win this award for this audit. As part of the audit process, the auditors provide a management letter which documents any findings related to internal controls, and the 2022 audit resulted in no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in our internal controls. Moving on to reviewing some of the major funds identified in the report, and starting with the general fund. The general fund is the main operating fund of the village and posted a surplus of a little over $2 million. Key drivers of the $2 million surplus include, first, revenue came in at 103% of budget, primarily due to intergovernmental revenues, including sales and income tax, which performed better than anticipated. If you recall, when we were formulating the 2022 budget, it was the fall of 2021. At that time, there was still significant uncertainty. We were at the tail end of the pandemic. Inflation, supply chain issues were just starting to rear their ugly head. Some economists were even calling for a recession in 2022. So we did budget revenues fairly conservatively, and total revenue ended up performing better than anticipated for the year. Additionally, we held the line on expenditures, and I'm happy to report that all departments operated within their approved budgets, and expenditures totaled 93% of budget. In total, the general fund unassigned fund balance currently stands at $15.77 million, or 61% of operating expenditures. The village has a fund balance policy in place, which requires 50% of budgeted operating expenditures as a minimum, and we exceed that amount. For 2022, the village did assign a portion of the total fund balance totaling $16.3 million. The assigned fund balance is a category which accounts for amounts that are identified with a known intent to be utilized for a specific purpose. So of the $16.3 million, there are assignments for $11 million to account for future transfers to the Stormwater Fund, $1.9 million for the transfer to the Business District Fund in 2023 for downtown revitalization, and $2.5 million in transfers, or in amounts identified for the capital improvement plan for 2023. Moving on to the enterprise funds or the utilities. Total cash balances in the utility funds did decrease from $29.6 million to $17 million. This is largely due to the timing of cash flow for the first phase of the stormwater project, which is largely being funded by a $16 million grant. So we had expenses that occurred in 2022 for the start of the project, and anticipated grant revenues that we were anticipating last fall. By the time we got through the state's process, started to begin receiving those grant funds in 2023. So, result of that timing issue, the cash balances did dip a little bit in the utility funds. In terms of capital spending, for the year, capital spending totaled $28 million, which was about 90% of the amount budgeted for capital. Key capital investments were made in stormwater, $18.3 million, downtown streetscape, $2.3 million, street rehabilitation, $1.4 million, and water and electric infrastructure of $4.5 million. In regards to the village's pensions, the result of the audit shows that the funding status of the public safety pension funds did decrease in 2022. The police pension currently stands at 71% funded, down from 89% in 2021. And the fire pension currently stands at 64.5% funded, down from 81.5% in 2021. Both of these funds are down due to negative investment performance in 2022. And it should be noted that that is on a mark-to-market basis. So they take the actual market value of the investments at year end, and they mark it down to the actual market value. On an actuarial basis, this is the basis that we utilize in determining our annual funding for the pensions. They smooth out the annual investment gains and losses. They do utilize a 5-year period to smooth out these gains and losses. So the movement in the actual funding percentage of each fund is much less volatile. So if you look at it on an actuarial basis, the police pension fund went from 80.4% funded last year to 79.3%. And fire went from 74% funded to 72% funded on an actuarial basis. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, the pension system that covers most of the non-public safety staff, is currently at 88% funded, down from 110% last year. And like the public safety pension funds, the decline in funding percentage was driven by investment return. Finally, in addition to the annual comprehensive financial report, we have prepared a popular annual financial report, or the PAFR. So the purpose of this report is to promote greater transparency and clearly present a summary view of village finances in a format that's more easily digestible for the average resident. So the main audit is about 180 pages long, very detailed, very technical, a lot of accounting jargon. The popular annual financial report, it tries to pull the key numbers and the key information that residents would find useful. It's only about 16 pages. With the help of the village manager's office, it looks really nice, with lots of nice graphics as well. We submitted that report for the GFOA award, and we were awarded for that report as well. So with that, that concludes my prepared remarks. I would like to turn it over to Ron Amon to comment further on the audit.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim, and good evening, everyone. A little bit of piggybacking on what Tim already said, but the Certificate of Achievement, as Tim alluded to, the village should be very proud that you're part of the program. I like to make sure the board always understands that earning the award has nothing to do with your financial health. It makes sure that all the rules and regulations that are required in a government local are adhered to. So that's where the program distinguishes itself. Right behind there, and the most important reason why I'm here tonight, is the independent auditor's report. All units of local government are required to have an independent auditor's report. Our report is clean or unmodified, and that in auditor lingo is that all the financial statements are materially correct based on our auditing procedures. And it is the only opinion that you want from your auditors. I'm going to pick just 2 pages, so if you either have a copy or want to make notes of these pages. In the governmental fund types, the village has 3 different funds. On page 33 is a combination of the income statement, so the revenues and expenditures for those 3 funds for the year. As Tim alluded to, the general fund is included in there. There also is capital project funds and a group of non-major funds, and those grouped together had just over a $2 million increase, and as Tim alluded to, basically that increase is related directly to the general fund. And then from there, I'm going to do the same exercise Tim did with the group of proprietary or enterprise funds, and that's on page 37 and 38. And under the accounting rules, which Tim gets into the grants and the matching principles of that, but on page 38 in the total column on the 3rd line up, your proprietary funds had an increase in fund balance of just over $9 million. And that's basically taking the grant and then turning it into capital. So from there, I can answer any questions either about the CAFR, about the management letter, or about any of our auditing procedures.
Sweet. Good to see you again. Any questions? No? We good over here? Down here? Bob? Can't hear you.
How's that?
That's better.
Okay, sorry about that. Ron, we have a lot going on, obviously, in our financials. I thought the report was fantastic. Tim and Dell did a great job. A lot of information in there. Ron, is there anything, I mean, we obviously have some significant initiatives ongoing right now with committed capital to those. I made note, I had some correspondence with Tim on the pensions, which I want to ask a question about. But is there anything, you know, out of the ordinary with our financials, with the way things are going with our money flows, et cetera, that raise any yellow flags to you, given the amount of activity we have going on in the village?
First, from the audit perspective, you got a clean opinion, so that's always where you want to start and make sure. That means that everything we do with testing of internal controls, and then as we work through the trial balances and the posting of all the activity that did happen, across all of our clients, especially in local government, we obviously saw an uptick of activity. Everybody's coming out of the pandemic, lots of grant activity, lots of new capital. So I think in terms of what we see in your audit is very similar to what we see in others. And then I think for your staff to be able to manage that in the year and then prep for the audit and get us through the audit as the team approach goes from both sides is probably a true testament to your staff. It met the same timetable, even though there was a lot more activity and a lot more things to process through because of the activity. So.
Okay, that's, yeah, I agree on the staff. Now let's, on the pensions, and Tim, you may have some further comment on this. And I know that the returns in 2022 were not great, but that, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was the first year of state oversight of the pensions. And, you know, I don't know that the returns were anything better or worse than we would have achieved under our management. But I hope that we can dissect those returns going forward fairly carefully so that we can provide input to the state now that it's out of our control and sort of monitor in some detail exactly what's going on with these funds. I feel like they're a little, removed, I guess, from our direct oversight now. So I just hope that we can have ongoing reviews and monitoring of those returns.
So the 2022 investment year was the year of transition to the consolidated. The fire consolidated in January of 2022, and then the police fund consolidated in terms of investments right at the end of June, early July, to the consolidated investment funds. We still have local fire and police pension fund, and Trustee Dearborn, they do provide a lot of feedback to the consolidated funds. in terms of their performance and any ideas that they might have. So they're still pretty actively monitoring the consolidated investments, I would say, at this point. And there's also, 600, roughly 600 other pension funds across Illinois who are also providing feedback as well.
Have we received a detailed report of those investments? I can't recall seeing kind of how we're positioned now, because I think there was going to be more private equity, more alternatives in there, and I don't know what our funds are now invested in.
Yeah, they do provide detailed reports. We have some of those uploaded to our transparency section on the village website.
Yeah, you did send those to me. I didn't see the individual investments though. I guess that's what I'm getting at here. I saw that we have X% in equity, X% in foreign, international, X% in fixed income, so on and so forth. But I didn't find a section that showed the actual investments. And I'm just saying that we should see that, I think, particularly in these early years as we get comfortable or otherwise with the way the money's being handled.
Okay.
So my thought.
Any others? Questions? That should do it. Again, thank you so much for the hard work. Staff, Del, you and the gang do an awesome job. Ron, I say this I feel like I'm saying it every year. I mean, my first year as a trustee in 2008, when I didn't know what was even going on, Ron Amon was up there providing us with our audits at the time, and it has become such a comforting feeling for me to know that you guys are looking this thing over. And I think the award, although some people might slough it off, is a really important piece to this whole thing, and I think it adds another level of confidence for the public and the community to understand that Rob and his team are doing the right thing with our money, and we're being very careful with it as well. So thanks so much for that, Ron. We really appreciate it.
Okay, I appreciate it, and thank you.
One other thought, Chris. In addition to that the reporting is right, I have to commend Rob and the village managers and this board. When we start this process of budgets with so many moving parts and the progress we want to make, it's very hard to stay on and do what we're doing. And holding the line for what, 8 years? 8 years now in taxes on any increases? 9 for any increases to the village on tax rates. Is pretty remarkable, and you look at the vibrancy of this village, all that's getting done as we are moving and progressing forward from streetscape to infrastructure to you're going to have all 3 parts of the village, Indian Hill, Hubbard Woods, and the Elm District are looking better. Our vacancy is falling, hot restaurants, great retail. It's a lot to try and make that much progress and still hold the line in standard budget. So. And just do the day-to-day. So, good job.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, the next presentation this evening is on the voluntary lead water service line replacement program, and staff is looking for some quick policy direction on this. Council will be considering additional funding for the voluntary lead service line replacement program. Water and Electric Director Brian Keys is here to review.
Good evening. Thanks for the introduction, President Rentz. In August of 21, the state of Illinois enacted the Lead Service Notification and Replacement Act, which put specific requirements on the village moving forward with those properties that have lead services. And for those that are in the audience or listening, approximately a third of the water services in Winnetka are lead or partially lead. So it's a little over 1,500 water services. As part of the 2022 study session in September 22, the policy direction was set by the council that we would establish a voluntary lead service replacement program whereby customers could voluntarily elect to proceed with replacing their water service. The village would fund 50% of the cost up to $5,000 per customer. As part of the budgeting process for the first year of the program, we had 20 spots in the budget for 2023. When we rolled out that information about the program, those spots filled before 2 days of business were over. We continued to track people that were interested in the program, And we have a waiting list of 125 people at this point in time that are interested in moving forward with their lead service replacement. But we only have funding in the voluntary program for 20 this year's budget. Staff is requesting permission to move forward with funding approximately half, so 60 additional slots for 2023. It would have to be completed by November when we do the moratorium on road closures. And the proposed funding mechanism, so another 60 slots would be basically $300,000. In the water fund capital, we had allocated $50,000 for contracted services to help manage the lead service program. And we have not used any of that funding this year. To date, it's been handled by staff internal resources. So we're proposing to use that $50,000 as a partial offset. And then based on the completed audit, and I was hoping Ron or Tim would call out the fund balance, but we closed the water fund at $5.9 million at the year end of '22, and our fund balance policy requirement is $1.4 million. So we request permission in your consideration of drawing down the fund balance or the accumulated fund balance by the balance of $250,000. And would take any questions you have on that request.
Sure.
Yes.
Has everybody who is in that 1/3, have they all been notified already? So
Correct.
everybody knows about it, and of all the people that are affected, there's 120 people on the list?
Correct. So as part of the September direction from the policy, from the council, is we sent out to all 1,500 plus people that have a record of either lead or partial lead water service, a notification that, one, confirming that according to our records, you have a lead water service, and two, about the programs, which is an emergent program. Lead service replacement is part of capital water mains, and then the voluntary program, which is what I'm speaking about tonight. So, yes.
Thank you.
Kim?
Okay, Kim, sorry.
Brian, I seem to recall that during the discussion, we talked a little bit about how this was sort of, the first 20 were sort of a ramp up to doing this on a bigger scale for staffing and other reasons. Is there some trade-off in some other project, given that your staff would spend the time
So
on this new
this,
60?
the voluntary program does require staffing resources, and most of that falls on my peers in community development from a permitting process. My staff reviews the proposals and authorizes the payments through finance to the residents. So we feel we can manage another 60. And since there is a pending requirement for the village in the next 17 years to replace all lead services, and there was quite a bit more interest than what we anticipated, we thought, if, strike while the iron's hot, to be honest. When we proposed the 20, we had gotten some, say, lukewarm feedback from other people that had offered programs that the take rate was not that high. So we thought actually 20 would be, for year one of the program, would be more than enough slots. And clearly that was not what we received from the residents of
You
Winnetka.
sold out.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm thrilled that it's having the intended consequence of getting people thinking about what they have coming into their house. So I think that's great. I know it's up to $5,000. Are you spending? I know there are a couple of instances of people I know that have done this that have spent less than that. Is it averaging more?
It's trending. I'd say based on what I've seen go through on the approvals, it's trending at the 5,000. So it's the
It is,
total
okay.
replacement cost, which includes tapping fees and the contractor and the meter fee. So when you add those three together, it's 50% of the total.
Right.
And unless the water main's very close to your house, so you have a short front yard, any distance, they're comfortably, well, unfortunately, they're paying more than $10,000 to get their service replaced.
Okay. And it's all independent. We don't lead them to any type of favored supplier or somebody that can give them better
This is
deals.
completely independent, so
Okay.
as long as they use a licensed plumber, and they submit quotes, and then we look at it, and then authorize them to proceed, and then after it's been inspected, approved, well, then we release the funding
Yeah.
through the finance department.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, for the non-voluntary, for the homeowners along the water main work, where we were going to require them to replace their mains or their lead service lines, has there been any pushback on that from any residents who have opted out of the program?
So lead services is a topic that generates a lot of passion on, regardless of whether it's part of the water main programs. We've had some positive feedback. Well, for example, on the projects that are underway right now, we've gotten 2 sets of feedback. On the Cherry Street project, the residents were receptive to using the village's contractor, ALAMP to perform the replacement work, so we had a higher take rate. We're doing the planning phase on Scott right now, and we're seeing the residents start to get marketing savvy and get together as groups of people and try to get better pricing from a local contractor. So there's been 2 different sets of feedback. One was we appreciate having someone just to go to and we don't have to do any quotes. And the residents on Scott that we haven't started yet are saying, hey, we can beat the price that you're offering and we think we want to go with the private. So it's really either direction at this point in time.
Has anyone said no and opted, to execute a waiver or whatever?
Yeah, we've had, I don't have the exact count, but we have had residents execute the Department of Public Health waiver saying they're electing not to replace their lead water service. And just a little additional details, as part of a water main project, when we put a water main in service, I'm required to state to the department, to the IEPA, that we're not supposed to reconnect any lead services, and if we are reconnecting one, that we have a waiver, an executed waiver from that customer before they're allowed to connect to the new water main.
Great, thank you.
Tina?
Is there any thought to what year 3 of the program looks like? And will we look at, 60 more, or do we think we can scale this a little bit higher?
So the goal would be for next year is to as we prepare the budget for your consideration in October, is to make sure that we account for if all our funding layers in like we anticipated to with respect to budgeting, we would attempt to cover the remaining backlog that's not getting covered this year. So those that expressed interest would have a slot in 2024. We would, I don't foresee recommending any change in the dollar amount based on the take rate at this point in time. And similarly, I don't see any changes to the emergent or the capital planning in absence of council direction.
Is there any planned additional communication to remind people of this program?
I think based on the feedback we got from those that received the letter, I think we would be recommending a budget amount for the communication, and that for the next probably 17 years that we'll send out a letter at the first quarter every year saying, according to our records, you have a lead water service, because we've had people that moved into homes that didn't know they had a lead water service. We had people that, well, now that there's a program, I'm interested. So with the transition of people in houses and the movement, that I think until we've got it done, that we're going to have an annual correspondence is what I see going forward.
Great, thank you. I'd like to see the realtors require on the MLS form a disclosure. I mean, we have to disclose lead paint. It seems like it would be nice if they required disclosure for lead service lines.
Well, I know that if they sign the waiver, that definitely gets reported back to the state. And does it get recorded on title as well, Brian?
I don't know that it gets reported on the title, but what I do know for those that are in the audience or people online is that on the village's website, by address detail, we're required regulatory-wise to post not your name, but your address and what the water service material is. So, whatever your address is, it's going to say what the village record reports for that. And there has been some individuals that have provided documentation in field audits where we had a record-keeping error where they did have a water service that was copper. But for the most part, the record is been very reliable as far as knowing if you have a lead water service. And to your point, Trustee Dahlman, realtors, I don't know how many total transactions, but I get realtors that are for the buyer and the seller calling us, and we point them to that site for information.
Any others? All right, we need policy direction here. Just a quick straw poll, show of the hands. Who would be in favor of upping this? Okay, we have a majority. We have a unanimous policy direction to move that ahead. So go for it, Brian. Okay, we're up to item 7, establishment of the consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Okay, and item 8 is the approval of the consent agenda. I'll ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the village council meeting minutes for June 20th, 2023 regular meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated June 16th, 2023 through June 30th, 2023 in the amount of $350,072.12. Resolution number R67, 2023, approving a contract with the Okanite Company for the purchase of 15 kV underground cable. Resolution number R68, 2023, approving a contract with Precision Pavement Marking Incorporated for paving services for the pavement marking program. Resolution number R69, 2023, approving a contract with Schroeder and Schroeder Incorporated for concrete flat work. And resolution number R70, 2023, waiving competitive bidding and ratifying a contract with Rusco for the purchase of single-phase transformers.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote?
Trustee Handler?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Apitoff?
Yes.
Trustee Orsic?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Albinson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving along, we're up to item, make sure I didn't miss anything. We're up to item 9, ordinances and resolution. Without objection, I would like to consider reordering the agenda as follows. First up would be, what is on the agenda now is 9E, which is ordinance number M11, 2023, which is the Asbury Avenue. Secondly, we will hear the permit abeyance period. Third, the Lakefront Overlay District. Fourth, the Lakefront Overlay Map. And fifth, we'll review the special use amendments. We all okay with that? Okay, so that's where we'll go. So our first item tonight is ordinance number M11, 2023, 1415 and 1423 Asbury Avenue. This is for a final plat of subdivision and granting variations from the Winnetka zoning ordinance. Council will consider a final plat of subdivision and granting zoning variations from the applicants at 1415 and 1423 Asbury. And Assistant Community Development Director Ann Clausen is here tonight to review it. Hi, Ann.
Thank you, President Rentz. Good evening, trustees. As President Rentz just summarized, this request does involve changing the lot line that is between two properties, and the two existing homes would remain. And the project also involves construction of 2 new detached garages, one on each of the new lots. Now, there are existing zoning nonconformities that existed prior to this lot line adjustment that will remain. There are also zoning nonconformities that would be created as a result of the proposed re-subdivision. And lastly, there is one variation needed for the construction of the proposed detached garage on the 1415 Asbury lot because the existing improvements currently exceed the permitted gross floor area. The subject property is located on the north side of Asbury between Vernon and Gradewood Avenues. It's located in the R5 single-family residential zoning district, and it is surrounded by the same. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the R5 calls for the more intensive development in the village. So if approved, the owner would demolish the existing detached garage on the 1423 Asbury lot and re-subdivide those 2 lots. It would be adjusting that lot line 8.75 feet to the west. So lot 2 that you can see here on the right, that's 1415. The lot area and lot width would increase for 1415 while decreasing for 1423 Asbury. As they currently exist today, they're pretty equal in size as they exist today again. The proposed subdivision fully complies with the zoning in terms of lot area, lot width, and lot depth. However, 2 zoning nonconformities would be created for the existing improvements on the 1423 Asbury parcel. One being the minimum required side yard setback from the new east property line, as well as the total side yard setback requirement. Those 2 would both be not in compliance with the new requirement. However, I will note that zoning relief is not necessary for the proposed garage that you can see here, or for the new driveway. Currently, the driveway accessing 1423 is on the east side of the home. The proposed plan involves relocating it to the west side, but again, that does not require zoning relief. Now, on the 1415 Asbury parcel, as I mentioned previously, there are existing nonconformities that would remain, one being the gross floor area. Now, when the home was built in 1999, it fully complied with the zoning. However, due to subsequent amendments to the zoning ordinance, the basement is now included in the gross floor area. So as it exists today, it exceeds the permitted gross floor area. Now, they are proposing a one-car detached garage that would represent a net increase in the gross floor area, hence the need for the zoning variation that they are requesting. So in addition to the existing non-conforming gross floor area, the other three nonconformities that would remain would be the front yard setback, the front yard lot coverage, and then the building line articulation. Now, the Plan Commission did consider the request on March 22nd. The commission's discussion was primarily focused on the impact the proposed driveway at 1423 Asbury would have on the neighbor immediately to the west of 1423. The driveway was originally designed so that in its entirety, it would appear to be immediately adjacent to the neighbor's driveway. At the March meeting, the applicant's representative noted that they were working on redesigning that driveway to address the neighbor's concern. They subsequently submitted a revised plan. But before I get to that, the Plan Commission did vote 4-0 to recommend approval. They submitted that revised plan for consideration by the zoning board at their meeting on June 12th, and they did recommend approval by a vote of 5-0. Now, the neighbor to the west did provide email correspondence to staff noting concerns related to stormwater. Former Assistant Village Engineer Emily Grimm did respond to those concerns. Those concerns, her email, rather, was shared with the neighbor. They have since provided another email, which was provided to the council this evening. It's on the dais for your consideration. Now, in terms of the neighbor's concerns, the applicant will be submitting final engineering plans that will have to be reviewed by village engineering staff to confirm that the proposed improvements do fully comply with the stormwater regulations. So I just want to add that. I have nothing further unless you have questions.
Any questions for Ann? I have one. For the benefit of everybody up here and out here as well, the GFA on the particular, was it 14, on the 1415
Yes.
house?
Mhm.
I mean, you look at the picture, if you want to go back to slide 7 once. No, one more the other way.
Oh,
There you go.
yes.
So that'd be the house on the right.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And the reason why the basement counts is because this is raised up out of the ground, how many feet?
More than 2.5 feet. The first floor is more than 2.5 feet above the adjacent grade.
So then, if you look at the house, you say it's a 2-story house, right? I mean, but fundamentally, from our zoning perspective, we're classifying it as a 3-story house.
No, it's still considered to be a 2-story home with attic, that there is calculable space up there. The basement is not considered a story. It's just included in gross floor area due to the exposure above grade. So it does not constitute a full story. It's just the fact that the floor itself is more than 2.5 feet above the adjacent grade.
Okay. Yeah, I know the city of Chicago did something years ago with the English basements where I remember we had to play all sorts of gymnastics to get around that. So they were actually penalized by the fact that they built this house up out of the ground and then later the zoning code changed.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and just to confirm, on the 415, this new garage is a third garage bay, is that right?
That is correct. There's
Because
currently
there's a 2-car garage in the.
attached garage, yes.
Go ahead.
How about total impervious surface area? Because it looks like you're going to, I mean, there's a lot of impervious surface already on 1415, you've got the circular driveway, you're gonna be going back. Then, you know, there was a shared driveway, right, between these two properties previously? And now we're adding a full, I mean, even though it's allowed, you have a full new driveway
Yes.
along the west. I mean, that seems to be a lot of additional impervious surface area into an area that looks like it floods.
They are within compliance on both lots, actually. On the 1415 lot, this lot here, they're allowed over 6,600 square feet, and they're at approximately 6,400, so it is relatively close.
Okay.
On the 1423 parcel, they're allowed approximately 5,200 square feet of impermeable, and they're at about 4,300. Now, they're not representing you know, significant improvements in terms of a patio at the back of the home. So that will obviously be recalculated if anyone were to ever come in for a permit on that.
Right, so if somebody buys, because I think the intent is to preserve this historic resident and maybe, you know, sell it, there's going to be very little somebody can do without a variance on 1423, because they'll be maxed out, right?
900 square feet.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Sure.
Is there actually a shared driveway? I thought that there were adjacent driveways, but not actually shared.
That's correct.
Oh. Well, thank you.
And
Question?
just a quick question here.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
And I think we probably all have some, you know, empathy, I guess, for the neighbors to the west. I've read both their letters that they sent, and they're just concerned about water, drainage, et cetera, which I can understand. You know, the driveway's moving from the east to the west. How does the village? Well, first of all, do you know if the neighbors have spoken with one another and gone through these plans? And second question is, how does the village monitor this to provide the reassurance that those neighbors to the west are looking for, that this won't create an issue, because it's a fairly dramatic change from their current residence, I guess. You know, how do we, I know they're complying with stormwater, but I mean, how do we stay involved? Are we involved in their engineering and making sure that this is right? How do we give some reassurance that their property is not going to be negatively impacted?
To answer your first question, I'm not aware whether or not the neighbors were in communication with one another. I think the applicant can probably answer that question for you, but in response to your second question, they will have to submit final engineering plans representing full compliance with the stormwater regulations. And they cannot direct water runoff onto the neighbor's property. They are representing that they will not, and the village engineer will review those plans to confirm that. And then there will be final inspections once construction is complete to verify that it is constructed according to the approved plans.
And as-built.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
That okay, Bob?
Yeah, I'd be curious whether the owners of the property have talked to the Minturns or whatever their names are, you know, to see if they've had dialogue about that issue. I mean, I think, again, you know, if we were in their position on and seeing this driveway move next door, I think we'd probably share concern as well.
Okay, could the applicant potentially respond to this?
Good evening, President Rintz. My name is Cal Bernstein. I'm the attorney for the applicant, and I'll just answer the question. At the beginning of the process, the owners of the property did talk about this, but as it evolved, the neighbor to the west travels a lot and has 2 other homes, and they're not around that often. So as far as, I asked the question today, whether there's been any recent conversations, the answer is no. But there has been conversations with the neighbor to the north. And as Ann pointed out, there's that excessively large garage currently behind 1423, which is causing a lot of the water issues in the rear. It's in the pictures that you saw today that the neighbor had sent. And the whole purpose of doing this is also to address those water concerns in the rear of the property. So if this, assuming this gets approved, we believe that based on the engineering that we are providing, that there'll be a dramatic improvement in the stormwater and how the water's handled on 1423 that's going to benefit all the neighbors. Not just the neighbor to the west, but also the neighbor to the north.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So what kind of engineering are you showing? We don't have the, are you putting in a basin to catch
Yeah,
some
I
of that
believe
water?
what the architect is here. You want to address that?
There's a new 18-inch line going in.
Well, but
Yeah.
for instance, when all I did was close our patio, I had to solve the neighborhood problem by putting in a huge.
Now the truth comes out.
Well, a huge catch base, that's why I'm here. No, that the mosquito abatement district has to constantly make sure I don't have mosquitoes growing in there. So my point is, we solved, and I just want to make sure we have a clear picture of what kind of remedial structures you're going to put in place.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jim Chambers. I'm an architect for the applicant. And the main piece that the engineers have proposed here is a new 18-inch diameter drain back from the worst area in 1423, connecting to the city storm system. And also the downspouts on that side of the home are all connected to the storm. Currently, they splash on grade.
So is there anything retaining it? So if you have a big storm event or a snow mount, I mean, I don't know, Bob, if you have the benefit of the email that we received showing the pictures from March. That's a lot of water.
Yes.
And so is there going to be something that, not just a pipe, but is there going to be a basin that retains it?
There's no retainage required, according to the engineer, once this 18-inch diameter drain is connected.
I think we should look at that because,
Well, that's the purpose of the drain, which going that location where the water is pooling in the back of the property. Again, that really more impacts the neighbor to the north.
I understand.
And so what the neighbor to the west is concerned about is actually the driveway, which is a different issue than what we're talking about now.
Right, but but you're adding impervious surface, but you're within, I mean, you're gonna have more water there. I just want to make sure we're clear of what that, pipe
We're also
does.
removing a very large 2.5, almost a 3-car garage. So we're replacing that one garage with 2 smaller structures. So I believe there's less impervious surface if you combine the 2 lots.
Yes.
Yeah, currently existing, I believe there's less impervious than the current conditions because of that large garage behind 1423.
Others? Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Public comment on this issue. Would anybody like to speak on this matter this evening? Seeing none, we'll bring it back up here. I'll just start out by saying that we have to be cognizant of the fact that both of our advisory bodies have given us unanimous approvals on this, and recommendations, I should say. And, typically that's something we don't take very lightly. So, Tina, you have some concerns. How would you like to see them addressed?
No, I just want to make sure that, we have a full engineering review of it. I'm surprised, since I didn't get to just put a pipe in, so, it's unfair, but when you come into a situation, you get a building permit, you sometimes do have to deal with neighborhood conditions caused by the north property line, but that's just kind of how it works. And, I just want to make sure we're adequately looking at it. I'd hate for this permit to get approved and then there's still flooding there. That would be bad for the Minturn family.
Yeah, well, I guess for me, not that it matters, is you put an 18-inch pipe in that little
Right.
area, that's going to move a lot of water very quickly at least into the village storm sewer system. Now, if the storm sewers are backed up, then that's a whole different issue. But to me, an 18-inch pipe is substantial and it moves a lot of water. So I think the applicant is trying to address the issue. And certainly the neighbor, Bob, as you indicated earlier, and you know, the neighbor has echoed concerns, and, you know, their last email, which came in very late today, did you get that one too, Bob?
Sure did. Yep.
Yeah, basically what they're just doing is urging that we make sure we
Yeah.
hold to our rules and stick to our guns and make sure that everything is installed the way it's designed. That make sense?
If people would like a little color on what planning discussed, the main issue is the underground garage in 1415 is impractical. It's not a two-car garage really because it's so difficult for the way to go around and try and get in that it's really only a one-car garage, because initially the question was, well, why do you need a three-car garage? And it really, zoning had agreed, I think Matt Bradley used the word obscene to talk about how it is trying to get into that garage. So that was the reason. It wasn't just, oh, they need an extra garage space. Now, I don't recall seeing pictures like this of the water, so I agree with your concerns, Tina, but I do recall some discussion of it. And I think that what they're trying to do is hopefully going to alleviate some of this. And to Chris's point, is there any repercussion if it doesn't? Like, not to your point about who asked, how do we monitor? Was that Bob?
Yeah.
I
When the
think I
question was
did,
asked,
Bridget,
how do
yeah.
we monitor that? So this is supposed to help, and we hope it helps. Is there anything to be done if it doesn't and it's still as bad, or is it just?
We're talking about Mother Nature and
Yeah.
and rain. I mean,
Okay.
who are you gonna punish?
I think you just make sure they take every reasonable precaution, and putting an 18-inch drain direct piping to the storm seems pretty reasonable.
That's a big pipe.
Yep.
It's a big pipe. Others?
I was just gonna say, one of the positives of this is, I was on zoning when this was originally subdivided, and the house at 1415 was gonna be torn down. And so this new plan also salvages an older home in town, which is certainly a positive.
With the existing owner wanting to remodel it and sell it, so there's a lot going on there.
That's a good point.
Okay, well, let me call it in and see where we're at. I don't think anybody is interested in waiving introduction tonight. I saw one no, that's all we need.
Well, no, I'm fine. I just want to be on record that we're really taking a serious look, because that looks a lot of water, not just normal snow melt, right? So,
So, well, maybe we do. Is there consensus for waiving intro and going to adoption?
Chris, I don't think we should do that. I think we should wait for the neighbors to be able to see this video and realize that we talked about it and see if they have any questions. So I would not want to adopt this tonight.
Good enough, that's all we need. Okay, so may I have, we're not waiving introduction, so may I have a motion to introduce ordinance number M11, 2023?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
I got it. Do I get a second? Okay, voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, and we'll move on. Applicant will probably be on consent unless we hear something from the adjoining property owners that don't jive with what we've heard yet tonight. Thanks. Okay, so item C is ordinance number MC 08, 2023, amending the text of the Winnetka zoning ordinance to establish a study and a permit abeyance period for construction in the steep slope area along Lake Michigan. At the July 6th meeting, council provided direction and changes to the proposed amendments to the study permit abeyance. So before we launch on this conversation, I just want to set the stage again for those of you who weren't here last week. Couple things. First of all, we're all neighbors in this room, for the most part. We all live in this little community that we all love. The people that are sitting up here are volunteers who are just as interested in the value and the beauty of this community as anybody in this room is. I will also say that everybody sitting at this dais is certainly not interested in trampling on the property rights of any of their neighbors. We may have different opinions on what constitutes a property right and what constitutes trampling, but you know, at the end of the day, we're up here trying to do what's best for the community. We're volunteers, we don't get paid for this. This isn't a red versus blue conversation, and we don't conduct ourselves like people in Washington, D.C. and Springfield do. You know, we're Winnetka and we are better than that. And so we should be talking in a passionate, but also a recognition of the fact that the folks here are just your neighbors like I am, and Tina is, and Kim is. And we expect to be treated that way. We don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody's property, but we have been made aware of some things that are, you know, a little concerning. And so rather than rushing ahead, because we are getting pressure from a lot of sides to do something, and I will tell you, I've been watching this village council now for quite a few years, and anytime I see somebody in a rush to do something, it's usually the wrong thing. And so my thought on the permit abeyance period was to make sure that we have the comfort and the time to do what is necessary and do what is right. And you know what? We may do nothing, but we at least have to get educated about what we're talking about and then understand the implications of it. So there's going to be a lot of further discussions on this, whether this matter passes tonight or not. But it's important that the community comes together and has these sorts of conversations. And I'm hoping that those of you who are property owners on the lakefront, that you continue to join us as these conversations proceed so that we can have good input and make the good decisions. Some of the way we make bad decisions, and I won't say this council has made a bad decision because we're too good for that. But the reality of it is when you're working in an empty room, you're only talking to 7 people. And when we have a group like this, we have a lot more people to talk about. I will tell you, you know, last but not least, there are 3 real estate professionals sitting at this dais, people who have spent their careers understanding this particular industry and have made a good living at it. I mean, I myself have sold well over 3,500, 4,000 homes in my small career. Tina works for a firm that probably sells that much and probably more in a year. And Kirk is doing some amazing thing in the urban environment, but we all understand when you start talking about property values, what constitutes an impairment and what doesn't. And certainly it's something that's on our mind a lot as we have these conversations. So any accusations that are coming from outside sources or third parties who claim to know, just know we have a wealth of experience up here, and we in no way want to look to compromise anybody's property values through this exercise. So with that said, where the hell are we going to go with this now? Oh, we have a real estate agent. Sorry, Bridget.
No problem. Minor detail.
I never paid much to real estate agents, so. Help me out here, Rob. I'm lost. Oh, David, I guess you're going to say some things, right?
Yes, just a few words. Again, just to repeat what President Rentz said, this is a permit abeyance period to study potential regulations. So we have to define what that means, and that's what the ordinance attempts to do, or does do. And last meeting you asked us to clarify a few things to make it specific that the abeyance period in terms of construction activity that is prohibited by it in the steep slope zone is that requires a permit. The amendment now does that. You asked us to clarify repairs or general maintenance of structures that may occur. We cleaned up that language a little in the ordinance. You asked to make sure that if there needs to be restoration of property due to some casualty loss, that would be able to occur. The ordinance has been amended to do that. You've also asked that if there's any construction activity that requires a permit that takes place totally inside the structure, then doesn't disturb any soil, that those permits can continue to be issued even though they may be in the steep slope zone. So we have drafted the ordinance to include those changes, and that's been presented to you. The only thing I would note is we did receive written protest. The village attorney has reviewed those and has determined the protests submitted do not meet the 20% threshold requirement of the ordinance, meaning there weren't enough based upon what we measure it against, and therefore the written protest is not in effect. Therefore, for the council to adopt an ordinance, you would need a majority of the council to approve the amendment rather than a majority, or rather than 4 trustees to approve the amendment. That I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Do you guys think it'd be good for Peter to review the changes? He did it? I mean, is that enough? I wasn't sure whether you were going to go word by word. Okay, so we're good there. Questions for David? Okay. No questions?
Actually, can I just ask one?
Sure.
Of David, do we have any way of knowing how many properties would be, have an improved area within the steep slope zone, the 40 feet from the top of the slope? Do
Well,
we have
to-
any way to understand how many homes or structures that would affect, that would fall into that area?
To actually do it, we would need surveys to
Yeah.
actually determine that for the over 100 properties along that. We haven't looked through those that we may have. So I couldn't say with any close accuracy what percentage there are, though I will tell you there are homes or principal structures that appear to be located within the steep slope itself. And there are those that appear from aerials and contours that may be also located in the steep slope zone, that additional, what we have now defined as that additional 40 feet from the top of the bluff.
So,
I have a question.
go ahead.
Does this abeyance period affect any permit applications that are pending or have been received, or as this is being contemplated?
Currently, there are 3 permits that have been submitted that would be impacted if you adopt this ordinance as written currently before you. So there are 3 permits that would be impacted.
So just to clarify, those are permit applications that have been received but not reviewed or approved?
Correct. They have been received, but they have not been approved.
So if this motion, or if this agenda item passes, those 3 permit applications would need to be put on hold, or what is our process for addressing those 3 permit applications?
Well, we're going to have a conversation
Yeah,
on
we'll
that
talk about that.
after the public
Okay,
comment.
got it.
I mean, there's several things that have been going on in the background here, you know, I mean, just in the chatter. One is we definitely want to talk about that, about what happens to the 3 permits that are in process and how we can deal with that. Secondly, there seems to be some, I won't say concern, but just some curiosity about why 40 feet and why is that necessary. So I think that's an important thing to talk about. And, you know, maybe just firming up some of the definitions related to what constitutes construction activity versus what doesn't, at least in the context of this and possibly moving forward. So, but we'll have those conversations after we get through our public comment period. All right, so now I lost my agenda. Hold on. Okay. So now is the time for public comment. So again, come up, take the microphone. We'll start in the front and work our way back. Might be good if, when we get to your row, you just raise your hand so I know you're coming up. And we'll work our way through the room until everybody's had their say. So would anybody like to start off this evening in the first row? Come on up.
I'm just going to close your computer so I don't mess with it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brandy Levinson. My husband Jordan and I I'm not really good at public speaking, so it's very difficult for me. But we purchased 333 Willow a year ago, and in April we moved in. We've been doing a lot of improvements to our house, mostly its maintenance, just being on the lake, there's a lot of maintenance, and some cosmetic items. We also did a breakwater project that had been approved a while ago that the previous owner did not do. We were told that the breakwater project was needed to help protect our bluff, and during that project, we had a study done on the bluff which showed that our bluff is only marginally stable and is becoming more unstable every storm, every wave. I brought pictures to show you guys if you'd like to see. We're sure that you're aware that we have a permit in process, where I'm assuming one of the three, to do the improvements on our bluff in our backyard, and we have information from our experts detailing the need for the work and what it will consist of. We have submitted all of that with our permit application. We've followed all the current guidelines set out by the village. We have done the due diligence to ensure that we are not making our bluff more unstable, but rather more stable for years to come. This is an expensive and very lengthy project, and we want it done correctly, which is why we have hired not only a general contractor, but structural engineers, geological engineers, a landscape architect, all that have been very highly recommended and that have done work in the village. We're doing all of this so that we can do what's best for our property and for the lakefront. We've completed a steep slope analysis of the existing conditions, and we also did soil borings and slope stability testing. And per our engineer's report that is also with our application, like I said before, our bluff is unstable and it's starting to fail. Earlier this year, we completed the first phase of our lakefront renovation, and we rebuilt the entire revetment in order to secure the base of the bluff. We have the pending permit on the second phase of the project, which includes stabilizing the bluff and the tableland. As part of that stabilization process, we propose to add structural piles and structural retaining walls along the top of our bluff. And hopefully that will, it will stabilize the tableland. All of our proposed bluff stabilization work has been fully engineered and calculated to exceed the highest recommended factor of safety. We think that we understand what the council is proposing, and we understand the need for the council to ensure that they are doing what is best for the village, and we certainly support that. We want to make sure, though, that the council understands that, we're in limbo until you decide what you're doing. As part of your objective, for the benefit of the whole village, we would anticipate that a permit process will be present to address the immediate needs of work to be done to protect the lakefront. With all that stated and noted, we would respectfully suggest and request that the village not effectively derail all of the responsible and appropriate efforts that we've undertaken at great effort and expense in order to address what expert engineers have identified as an existing unstable condition of our backyard and the bluff. The village should not take any action which would have the effect of derailing the consideration and processing of our pending permit on the second phase of the project, which includes stabilizing the bluff. As I noted earlier, and again, forgive me for saying this again, but it has been fully engineered and calculated to exceed the highest recommended factor of safety. Our bluff is a ticking time bomb that we have actively been trying to defuse ever since we purchased the property. I call upon the council to exercise balance and good judgment in implementing its objective for protecting the lakefront, while at the same time allowing us to complete this very important, essentially safety-based remedial action. Thanks.
Great.
I do have a question, though. I know we're going to discuss, or you're going to discuss, what happens with these permits. Once you figure that out, how will we be notified?
Oh,
Do
you'll
we
know
have to-
tonight.
Okay, well, if you say that you're going to go ahead and put this ordinance in, then I have no recourse, is basically what I'm asking.
Well, the ordinance hasn't been adopted yet.
I
and
understand that.
The potential for us to modify it and change it still exists. That's why we have public comments, so we can think about this stuff and tweak it to make sure that we're not doing any harm, right? And I've been thinking a lot about your plight as well as the two other permits. I've never met you, but it is nice to meet you.
This is a great way to meet someone.
It's the only place-
Hi.
Trust me, it's the only place you find me in town lately, so. Do you think that it would be too much to ask that in the event that we have this conversation, that potentially our coastal engineer reviews the drawings just to make sure everything is fine?
We have no problem whatsoever having you review whatever and having whoever review it.
Okay.
We only want to do what's best. We have another property in Florida. We live on the intercoastal there. There are a lot of things that we have to do that, you have to make sure they're done correctly.
Yep.
So we have no problem with that.
Okay, great. Well, we'll keep that in mind when we get to that part of the discussion this
Thank you.
evening. Thank you. First row, Mark, you got anything to say? Over here, anybody? No? We'll go down to the second row. Come on up. Oh, jeez.
I gotta stop drinking.
My legs go to sleep sitting on those hard benches too, so I know how it is.
When we had the high water level at the lake, that completely eroded.
Name, please?
My name is Morris Silverman, 765 Sheridan. We had the high water level at the lake. Up to that point, my bluff was fine. That water level eroded the bottom of the bluff and was deteriorating the rest of the bluff. We have a pool on top of the bluff, plus the fence, plus the yard, plus the house. If we had neglected it, that whole bluff would have gone. Eventually, it would have all eroded, and we would have had serious problems. My question is very simple. If we didn't step in and spend millions of dollars by the time we were done stabilizing the soil, putting in a concrete barrier, and stabilizing the bluff, who would have put up that millions of dollars? Was the city going to take it over? If you create too much adversity for us, we're going to hesitate about investing money in our bluffs, hesitate about maintaining our property. If we do that, eventually you're going to devaluate the property values, because people are not going to want to buy property that they know will have to put in tremendous amounts of money to stabilize, and that's why we bought on the lake. We bought on the lake because we wanted the beauty of the lake, we loved the city, and we thought this was a good way to live. So I'd be very careful with this ordinance. I think if you continue with it, it's going to open up a whole can of worms. You're going to create a lot of lawsuits for the city, and you're going to create a lot of very unhappy residents. One other point I want to make. People come in to build in this area on the lake because they want the beauty of the lake. If you take in any way create obstacles or barriers, the property values are going to go down. The property values go down, the people on the west side who pay a lot less taxes than we do on the east side are going to have to absorb those taxes. So now you're going to be confronted with a major problem. Our taxes are down, their taxes have to compensate for what you're going to lose through us. And believe me, I think we're probably one of the highest tax strips on the lake. I know my taxes are more than what I paid for my first house. But, so please, go cautiously with this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silverman. Leo, you got anything to say? Okay, I figured as much. Nobody over there? Let's move it. Come on up.
Thank you. I'm Charlie Mills. I live at 519 Hoyt Lane. Hoyt is not a very deep property, and 40-foot setback combined with the setback from the street leaves you frankly, not that much property to work with. I've recently built a house, and frankly, I built it, forget 40 feet, I built it into the bluff. And the engineering work I had said that the bluff was at least where I am, where we have pretty good beach, is one, very strong, and by building it the way I did, I strengthened the bluff. So if anything, I think I helped it. Furthermore, by building it back, build it a little bit further from the street, and I think that's a little bit of a benefit to people that walk by the house, which is, frankly, most of the people that see it. I also, for fun, have a boathouse that's, of course, on the beach and not so easy to do if there's a 40-foot setback. So I don't know. I think you should consider all these things. My previous home was also on the lake in Glencoe, and it's a very different situation. It had bluff problems, even though nothing was built near the bluff. I know Glencoe has a lot of different regulations, but it's got very different bluff than Winnetka, which is, for the most part, very solid. So, thank you.
Thank you. Second row, coming over here. Anybody over here? No? Okay, we'll go third row. Come on up. Tell the truth, please.
I always tell the truth. That's the problem. Good evening. My name is Jenna Radney. I'm here for everyone that owns in Winnetka, particularly those that own on the lake. A little bit about myself, and not to brag, but in the last 3 years, just to prove my reputation, I've sold over $340 million of real estate in New Trier District. And let me tell you, it's been a fantastic ride. I love what I do. I love the people that work in this town, that live in this town, that service this town, as I'm a service provider myself. Regarding a little bit about the lake and about the steep slope and what is this, who are we talking to? There are 4,356 households in Winnetka. Is that true? True. And then how many lakefront residents are there in Winnetka?
Jenna, this is public
No,
comment, not public conversation.
I'm just trying to, just because there's like facts that are not, there's 88 homeowners that are directly on the lake in Winnetka. And I say this for reference, so we understand the portion of who we're really talking to in terms of the village. So that's the first thing. I do think we're working backwards. I think it's unfortunate with what Ishbia did, that now we have to actually figure out what to do next. His building permits are in hand. He's going to build a house. And unfortunately, it's the lakefront owners now that are dealing with the aftermath of this situation. I think the key and why I'm here tonight is to talk about one word: devaluing. And that's what my expertise is in, and I want to explain that. Brandy talks about her house at 333 Willow. If something goes into effect, her house that she spent $12 million for, with the intention of redoing the bluff, adding a pool on the side, pretty much devalues it by about 30% in my eyes. So, Brandy, if you want to sell your house, there's your new number. Moving forward.
We're using facts here tonight. We're not predicting the future.
Okay,
I know
but
you've got a
my
great,
point-
wait. I know you've got a great crystal ball there, Jenna.
No, I don't.
But you know what? When you make statements like that, you devaluate the value of your conversation, because that is just intended to scare people, and it isn't based in any fact that you can bring to this table and show this council. Continue, please.
There's a house at 55 Prospect in Highland Park that sits on 0.76 of an acre. They have steep slope up there, and you cannot do any improvements to the bluff. That house is listed for $5.99 million. That same house in the beautiful town of Winnetka with the best lakefront would be listed for $12.5 million. Why? Is because you can add that much more to the property without the steep slope regulation. So where am I going with all this? And I'm sorry to bring the reality to the situation is, I don't understand how lakefront owners are now in this position where they have to defend all the money that they put into their homes. Wait, and more importantly, they have one key, huge problem every year when they wake up. What is the water gonna look like this year? Am I gonna have beach? Am I not gonna have beach? These are things that beachfront, lakefront owners are already worrying about in terms of the water. Maybe there's not gonna even be a beach and all these conversations will not even be necessary. But right now, there's a huge risk for them because they're worried about their land value and what does this mean for them. So I do think it's a very serious conversation. I think this group of individuals that own the lake are lovers of Winnetka. And I think when they do their bluff work, they do it better and beyond anybody. The engineers that are involved are top notch. There's no expense spared. And yet, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, has there ever been a violation after bluff work has been completed by a lakefront owner in Winnetka? Something to think about. So lastly, at the end of the day, I think everyone is a person. We all have family problems. We all have medical problems, issues. But why would we add another layer of a problem to people who pay their bills on time, who pay the biggest taxes in this town, and most importantly, they love where they live, and they put all of their money back into their biggest asset. I think it would be a big mistake to pass anything to actually limit these lakefront owners from doing what they deserve to do with their own money.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please. Come on up.
That's a hard act to follow. So I'm not sure where to go, but I'm Michael Hara. I live at 411 Sheridan, and I own 4 properties on the lake. I own 411, 391, and I did exactly what you're talking about. We took our bluff out, but I rebuilt it with structural engineering, stronger than it ever could be built today. And my biggest concern is, what are we talking about here? Are we concerned about the bluffs? Are we concerned about the structural engineering of it? We hired structural engineers that built the skyscrapers downtown. And we put in rebar and cement and made sure our bluff is not only stronger than it ever would be, it's also decorated with landscape. And I think that's the real issue that we should be discussing, not in advance of time and diminishing the values of our property. The 4 properties I own, I don't plan to ever sell them in my lifetime. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about what are we doing here. The property next door to me, I just took out a pool. The pool was within 40 feet. I took it out because we don't need it. We don't use that pool. But you could never rebuild it again based on what we're talking about doing here. What we should be talking about is structural engineering, making sure that anybody who wants to touch their bluff has structural engineering that is in accordance with what the village wants. It shouldn't be about trying to stop us from doing it. I have the best views, I think, on Lake Michigan. My house took 7 years to build it. My wife did it impeccably. And we have views that are just beyond anything I think that's in Winnetka. I moved to Winnetka from Highland Park, and I moved here because of the community. I love the school districts. My kids went to school here. They went to New Trier. They went to Greeley. They went to all the different schools here, and they were fantastic. I love the community, and I love the lakefront. And the property we bought, it's probably 20 feet, 30 feet from the beach, and we did that. We took the bluff apart, but we rebuilt it stronger than it ever was. And you could look at the engineering drawings that we did. And I won't tell you the amount of money I spent on engineering, just as I'm sure they're doing at 333. But that is, I think, the key issue here. We should be discussing what structural engineering. Is anybody who's going to buy a $10 million property today going to do something that's a negative to their property? You know, if somebody's going to build a $5, $6, $7, $8 million property, they're going to make sure their bluffs are stable. They're going to make sure they're putting the engineering into that bluff. They're not going to just arbitrarily, well, let's build a house and pray to God that it doesn't. But like they experienced, I've experienced here. We had low water mark where the sand was way out past the groin, and then all of a sudden we had high water marks. And we had put in revetments. I won't tell you the millions of dollars we had to do, but we're the stewards of these properties. I'm responsible for the property. I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough. I grew up in the city of Chicago in an apartment all my life, never had a backyard. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to move to Winnetka and have this incredible property now. And I take care of it. And I've brought in structural engineers. I brought in Shabika, who came in and told us exactly what to do to protect our property. We put revetments on both properties, on 411 and 391. My beach is pretty secure today. My bluff is absolutely secure. But with what you're talking about doing, if I ever decide to build a house next door on the property that needs to be redone for my daughter, to not build in the last 40 feet, take away the views, not put a pool back there, that's what the values are about. But if you detract the values from the lakefront, it's gonna I mean, I'm not a real estate person in houses, I am in apartment buildings, but if you detract the value of what we have on the lake, and like you talked about, it's only 80 houses, I didn't count them, and most of them, I think you're gonna find out, have structures or their pools within that 40 feet. I think maybe you wanna do a survey, maybe you wanna have all of us tell you what we have built back there before we make a decision. I don't think putting together a time frame of saying, let's stop this, because you'll detract the values for the next 9 months until you decide what you're gonna do. Again, I have no intentions of selling my property, so I'm not worried about that. But the next guy who wants to sell his property, nobody's gonna wanna buy it not knowing what's gonna happen. Can I build back there? Can I build towards the beach? Can I rebuild my bluff? So, you know, I question, what are we doing here? I think you should possibly put in strong requirements of structural engineering for the bluffs. That I would endorse 100%. They're doing it, and I did the same thing. We brought in structural engineers, we brought in soil tests, we did everything possible. And even the builder that was doing it, the contractor did this vent work, he goes, I've never seen so much rebar put into a bluff and shoring in my life. And that's what we did.
Hey, Mr. Aaron, we're going on 5 minutes now.
Okay,
so-
I'm sorry. I
No.
didn't mean to go on that long, but I'm very concerned of what we're doing here. And again, I'm not worried about it affecting my property today, except for the values. But again, I could have bought in Highland Park, but I didn't, because I
And I
chose
think
to live here.
you hit the nail right on the head. You know, the problem is that we are not versed and skilled in this subject matter. And like you said, put in engineering requirements, and that's all great ideas, but we don't even know what appropriate engineering requirements look like. That's why we need 9 months to take the time to get everybody in this room back in here on a couple of occasions and understand what you guys have done, how it worked, how it didn't work, and how we might better do a job of shepherding this thing. So, you know, people are getting freaked out over this 40-foot thing, and this isn't, you know, I heard people say, well, you know, when you say 40 feet, that's what you're going to write the law to, and it's, nothing could be further than the truth. You know, we went to our coastal engineer who simply said, if you want to be really safe and you don't want to compromise your bluffs, here's where you should draw the lines for the abeyance until we can learn about the differences. This week alone, I've learned, and I know several of my colleagues have too, that the only thing I know about the bluffs right now is they're very situational and conditional. Every single bluff property brings a completely separate, different set of circumstances, structure, geometry, and all that stuff. And that ultimately we may have to find our way to something that's an individual situational review when people want to go in and penetrate the bus. I don't know. That's why we need the time, so we can make good decisions rather than rushing around picking out engineering standards out of a book. So I appreciate your comments.
But why do we need 9 months to even live this?
Because we have the rest of the
what
summer,
are we
and
trying
we're,
to I mean, I know there's not, this is all
We're-
about what's happened on Ishbia, I understand that. But
we have the rest of the
So-
summer that we're not going to be doing this in, because people will be very upset that we're having really important conversations when everybody's on vacation. Secondly, we need to have the professionals have enough time to come in, understand the situation that we have in Winnetka, and come in and sit at the table and educate us, hopefully with you folks in attendance. And then we will try to understand what things we want to encourage and what things we might want to prevent.
Well, I
But
hope
that's way in the future, and none of us, I can guarantee you that none of us has any of the answers at this point. That's why we need the time, so we can study it appropriately and effectively and take the input so we do the right
The
thing.
one thing I'll leave you with this is that I wouldn't want to see any steep slope ordinance, because I think being able to build to the beach, being able to put a boathouse in, as Charlie Mills does, it's a tremendous value to anybody buying it and spending the kind of money. I've watched over the last, 20 years, the property values skyrocket,
Yeah.
both internally and externally.
Yeah, I
And
gotta
if
get
you
on to
just
the next
decide to put
person.
this timeframe together, I would beg you to allow them to fix their bluff.
And I beg you to
Because I would-
please come back when we have these conversations, if this will pass us tonight, so that we can get your input, because this is what we're looking for.
No, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks. Same row, anybody else? Tom? Julian, no? Cal? Okay, I'm moving down that line though. Come on up.
Just first and foremost, thanks for having this. And I appreciate everybody's hard work along this lines. So I live at 771 and 773 Sheridan. And, you know, just a few points. I think these have all been mentioned, so I'm not going to take a lot of time. First, every property is different. They have different requirements. So a 40-foot setback would, most of the people I know my property goes over the bluff. We built it over the bluff because we had a heritage tree. Everybody I've talked to is over the bluff and would not meet the 40-foot requirement. It goes into their bedrooms, it goes into their living rooms, so this 40 feet thing is, I heard you, you're gonna change it or whatever. Second, most of the people I've seen on the notes that Jenna sends around are totally against this. So I don't know where this 20% did or didn't come from, but I was out of town, I would have put my, letter in, but I couldn't get it signed in time and whatever. So the amount of time, I think you've got a big issue with the lakefront people, as you are more than aware of, Chris, I'm sure. And I do think we all want to be respectful, but the slope question is a huge, huge issue. And people can say, oh, I understand the value of land, but when you put a constraint on a land, I don't care what it is, it's going to lower the value. You can argue whether it's 5%, 10%, or whatever, but it will lower the value. And so that's a reality. Anytime you put a constraint on any solution, you lower the value. So that has to be, thought through. As far as the stability of the bluff, how could one argue with that, right? We all want safety, stability, things of that nature. We just don't want requirements that cause us to not do what we want to do. Everybody wants a safe bluff. Everybody wants to have stability on their bluff. I've poured millions into the stability of the bluff. You change that, I won't put money into it, and it'll be a big issue. Right? I mean, everybody knows that when we had the high water thing, we all poured millions of dollars up and down the bluff in order to stabilize it. So that's the reality. We just don't want to affect that. And we also don't want to affect the value of our land. We do want safety, we do want security, and we do want a stable bluff. So thanks.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Bob Zabers, 321 Willow. Starting with a question, if I could, for David, just what's the actual number of protests that were filed, just for facts? It would be nice to know that. Okay, a few quick things. First of all, in terms of any sort of ordinance, timing. So if you think about 9 months and someone wants to do something, that would be May of next year, or April or May. By the time the permits would come through, they wouldn't be able to build. So really what you're doing is telling anybody who wants to do a project, it's 2025 use to really have it in service for the summer. So I think 9 months versus 6, 9 versus 5 really does make a difference. So I understand the reasons. I was here at the last meeting, but if you think about the timing for permits, you couldn't turn around permits if you decide to do something or you decide to do nothing, you couldn't effectively turn that around in that time. So
Right.
Point one. Point two, height matters, right? For a steep slope, and obviously in Winnetka it changes quite a bit. So on my property, we have about 17 steps down to where the main part of the lake is, and about 14 more down to the water. My 13-year-old dog navigates it very well. It is not steep. So I think the perspective of advocating something in steep slope, it's kind of a lazy approach. And I'd say that if it's a bluff excavation, as we were talking about last time, that's possible. But steep slope is a lazy sort of convenient way to adopt somebody else's ordinance. If I'm a municipality and nobody has treated their bluffs, if I'm Lake Forest and I have miles of bluff that people haven't reinforced, or I'm Evanston where people have not put in a lot of reinforcement, great, go with a steep slope ordinance. But just look at Google Maps. Just look at what you paid people to present a few months ago. There's a lot of reinforcement. 75, 80% of all the homes either have a lot of stone, which you can see, most of which has been put in recently. So we're dealing with a 2016 problem, but not a 2023 problem. Just in the time we have, look at your phone, look at 80-some homes. Most have something there that's kind of new looking in terms of defense. So that doesn't really apply. The rest of them have large steel beams that go out. So try and find properties south of Tower that don't have some form of reinforcement. So I think that's part of the issue. You see, people are reacting to the fact that you're kind of legislating against their own interests. They've put millions and millions of dollars into this. You know, effectively, this is probably, from my hearing tonight, the same amount of money that's been spent on the tunnel. Imagine if that was privately financed. The $50 million for the tunnel was privately financed with basically lakefront reinforcement. And the benefit of being able to do that for the people who financed it is higher taxes. And then you're being told you can't use what you've paid to reinforce. I think that's the emotional problem you're dealing with. So don't do a steep slope ordinance. Do a bluff excavation ordinance. Do something else that addresses what people are reacting to, which is we all, it's kind of amazed to see the excavation that's happened, you know, down the road. But that's, I think, what's getting people emotional around this topic, not steep slope. And I think that really doesn't apply to our community because people have put tens of millions into the property already. And it's in their direct interest to keep it there. It's direct interest of all of us as taxpayers to share that value. And then finally, you know, the lake doesn't recognize property lines. I'm the next door neighbor of Levinson's here, and they've done a great job. And I'm sure there's our bluff has fortunately been reinforced for 20 plus years. And 40 feet goes into my living room, my bedroom, and my office. So that doesn't work. But they're going to do some great work as they have already. I'd like to support them, but if this goes through, I can't actually move anything on my property. I'd have to also apply for something to help them out. We like the lakefront to look natural, to be landscaped, and to support each other, not just look across property lines. So I also think that's almost a fail. Even if you say 3 or 4 people with permits can do it, you want their neighbors to also invest in a coherent lakefront. So please consider those things if you would.
Sure. And we will. Anybody else in that row? Come on up.
I'm Mike Bonds, I'm 139 Sharon, and just have a quick follow-up. You don't have the numbers of the people who submitted the protest with you, I understand. Could you please provide both the numerator and the denominator of the calculation?
I don't have the numerator and the denominator. The issue on all of the
I understand you don't have it now. Could you present it after the meeting?
Of course.
Okay, thanks.
That was it. All right, moving, I guess, to the fourth row. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Kelly Golden, 465 Sheridan Road. Thank you all for your time and for volunteering. I just want to share my experience with the Bluff. We bought the existing property next to us, 459, a few years after we moved in with the intent to build a pool and a guest house. And we applied for a variance with the full support of our neighbors dealing with the setbacks. We did not want to build close to the Bluff, and we were denied. So now our pool and our guest house falls within the 40 feet of what you're proposing. And I just wanted to share that with you because we had full support. He was granted the same exemption years ago. We were denied, so we were forced to build out on the Bluff. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Was that recent? Wow. Okay, going back, I guess we're in row 5 now. Come on up.
My throat is not doing well tonight, so I had something written out, but...
Can we have your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Joanna Karatzis. I live on Provident. I'm confused at this point as to whether the abeyance period is about all construction on the bluffs or including protecting the bluffs, or is it just for like homes and pools and?
It's for, fundamentally, at this point, we're really focusing on new construction.
Okay.
And so, no, and actually there's provisions in the ordinance, as David indicated earlier, that permit all those sorts of maintenance and repair work that people would normally do.
So if something happens to somebody's bluff, they can still put in revetments and
Of course.
go to protect it. This is just regarding putting in pools, pool houses, anything close to the steep slope area.
For now.
Okay. Okay, I think, I want to thank you for considering this ordinance and drafting the ordinance. And I think, part of the reason a lot of people have complained about shifting homes or problems with their structure is because they built too close to the edge to begin with. So, having a time period to review this is, I think you need to do that. And I wrote down some comments, I'll hand them in, but, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in that row? Now I'm lost, so just raise your hand and come on up.
My name is Phil Beck. I live at 735 Sheridan. And I agree wholeheartedly with Chris's introductory comments that whenever people rush to do something, it's almost always counterproductive. But my point is that a moratorium is doing something. What you're doing in a moratorium is disturbing the status quo. And what you're saying is that you're shutting down projects that could be helpful. And I understand that you probably will be addressing the issues about permits that are in process. But you're also prohibiting constructive projects that haven't been applied for yet. We heard last time from a gentleman who bought some property and was going to build a house, but he hadn't yet applied for the permits. He'd be precluded from doing that. And more importantly to me, concerned about the health of the bluff, if we have another natural disaster like we did a few Januaries ago, almost every lakefront owner sprung into action and took, and we did, immediate action to protect the bluff. And some of that requires permits. That would be precluded. If we have a January like that again, there's going to be disasters on the bluff, and no one's going to be allowed to take the protective action that we all took a couple of years ago.
Phil,
So-
that's not correct, though. The way the ordinance is sitting as we have it in front of us, that is not a correct statement.
Well, the ordinance, as it's sitting in front of you, says that any new construction, which includes addition of rocks and that sort of thing, that requires a permit, would be prohibited. And while there is an exception in there for repairs or general maintenance, there's
How about item C?
yeah, that's restoration of property, facilities, and structures that suffer a casualty loss and become damaged. But of course, what we all did was sprung into action and spent millions of dollars to prevent a loss,
Right.
not to repair a loss. So the ordinance as it's drafted right now would prohibit us from preventing losses by taking prophylactic actions. Meanwhile, so there, I think that the moratorium poses an actual significant threat to the bluff. And meanwhile, I'm not aware of any evidence whatsoever that absent a moratorium, there's an immediate substantial threat to the bluff. I understand that a lot of very well-meaning people in the community, but who don't have a lot of expertise, are concerned about the bluff. Meanwhile, all the lakefront owners, almost to a person, have a fair amount of experience with engineers, et cetera, and you hear a unanimous or near unanimous opposition to this. And it's not, as far as I know, perhaps I'm wrong, as far as I know, the council hasn't heard from experts who came in here and expressed concerns about any imminent threat. Instead, we've got well-meaning homeowners who don't live on the lake, who want to put a stop to any work on the lake. My view is, and I'm all in favor of proceeding with studies about structural stability and that sort of thing. I'm hugely in favor of that. But I think it's a grave mistake to shut down what could be very important work to protect the bluff for a period of 9 months instead of simply proceeding as we are, where there is no threat to the bluff, and hearing from the experts and finding out whether there's a need for action rather than intervening at this point. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bill. Anybody else? Hands up, please. Come on up.
Good evening. Lou Kenter, my wife Leslie's in back. We own property at 94 and 98 Mary on the lake. We renovated a house there 20 years ago. We've been lakefront residents for 20 plus years. We also did a major bluff project both on the toe and at the top. And I would like to say that a couple of points. One is you've done a great job at unifying the lakefront homeowners now. Because I have never seen such uniformity. I don't know how the calculation was done, but I assume there was no lakefront owner that was in favor of this. I guarantee you there was none. The people that were in favor of it who didn't, frankly, never heard it, never heard about this was going on. It was very pushed very quickly. So I would say, look, you may have met the technical qualifications to avoid pushing through this thing because there was not a lot of notice given, because that's maybe in the ordinance. I will tell you, I live in another lakefront community, oceanfront community in Naples, Florida. Similar kind of ordinance was put forward. 4 months of public hearings, 4 months, emails from the city council to each person on the intercoastal every month saying, hey, want to come to the meeting, want to hear from you. And after 4 months, the board did nothing. Because they actually heard from the homeowners down in Florida of what people proposed. They said, look, we are fighting the lake every year. If I had to wait for you guys to give me a permit to fix my bluff or do work down there, I think everyone that owns property down there, we all know John Chabika. If you put a moratorium on lakefront work, you're going to delay the supply chain of the guys that own the barges. The guys that own the barges are the only guys that can do the work. So if you tell him no work for 9 months, he's going to tell you, okay, 3 years to get my barge. There's only 2 contractors that do this work. We've all used them before. There's not a lot of them. And if you put a moratorium on there, that just means that guy is going to go work in Chicago and work in Milwaukee. He can take his barges wherever he wants, and we will fall to the bottom of the list. You can say you can get a permit, but you can't tell me I can get a contractor. So I would really encourage you to think hard about, listen to the homeowners that have done work on the bluff, who have had contractors. The really scary thing about it is we're all going to lose money on our house. We will never make money on the lakefront. You think Shabika's going to be able to sell that thing for the price, or that Ishpia is going to sell that thing for the price he's got into it? We're all going to lose money because we like living on the lake. We have spent so much money maintaining it. Your best bet is the 88 people that live on the lake. If you want to have intensive studies, like when you want to do something, that's fine. But the homeowners are the guys supporting the lakefront right now. We've all done it. After the 19 storm, went out and got another contractor, rebuilt it again. It is a never-ending battle. It is not, we do it once and you'll never have to do it again. It's every year. After this last storm, we had to go back and do some work down there again. Wasn't major, didn't need a permit, I think. But I will tell you, the homeowners are the ones that are really maintaining the property down in the bluff. don't take that away from them. Please don't. You really should think hard about what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? There's no clapping in this room, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Come on up.
Rick Duran, I'm a 42-year-old veteran, 42-year-old resident, 42 years of residency in Winnetka. You know, I think the basic, as I'm sitting back here listening to these comments, et cetera, most jurisdictions that try to say bluffs don't start at 40 feet. The state of California's got a 75-foot setback, et cetera. So the issue really is that you had a disaster. We have a disaster that happened last year, and now we're trying to react after the horse has been let out of the barn. I think you've got a triage that needs to happen. If it's over the 88 people along the lake, bring out the red mat, the green mat, the red mat, and the yellow mat, and divide those 88 people into. There are residents that have problems on their bluff that aren't doing anything. There are residents that have problems on their bluff that want to do things. They have residents that have already done their projects on their bluff and just want to know that you're not preventing them from doing it for the rest of their lives, or that their actions can actually transact in the marketplace if they want to. 9 months, you're never going to keep up with the market and the reaction to it and the price and adjustments and all that sort of thing. You just need to focus on the ones that are the problems on the bluff. If somebody's already got a plan in place to solve it, let that go forward. If they don't know about it, that's a different story. That puts them in a different triage square, and just triage your way through those a lot quicker than 9 months in a structure, et cetera. Most of the legislation on these kinds of things, state of California, state of Washington, et cetera, are all have a big long section on what if the hurricane hits tomorrow, or what if the flood hits tomorrow, the things you can do in a natural disaster or reaction to it. Those aren't the ones you want to prevent from being stopped either. So, you know, get a little more of nuance in your legislation and you'll do just fine. And the monopoly on not liking what you're doing will go to reasonable people and unreasonable people. Thank you.
Thanks. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Wes Bauman. I live at 445 Sunset Road in Winnetka, and I've been a resident for 42, 43 years, whatever it is. I'm a simple, retired high school administrator. I don't know engineering. I don't know real estate, etc. I came here thinking I was being for the abeyance. I have heard homeowners who have said, we want the bluff. We all want the bluff. A guy comes in with lots of money and tears the bluff down and causes all kinds of grief in this community. I think that what you should be doing is saying any project that is supporting maintaining the bluff is okay as long as they go through all the engineering things, the village reviews it and so forth. Support these people. You know, I'm sorry, Irene, I know that she was the one who hit us when we were walking in Centennial Park. We are thoroughly upset with what we saw go on there. But I think that the abeyance can wait and just do something that says any project that supports the bluff, because all these people want a bluff. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
No reason to apologize, Wes. Thank you. Anybody else? Wow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And what's next? I bring it up here.
Yep.
First of all, thank everybody for your input tonight. It does matter, and it does help shape, inform our thinking, because we're supposed to be sitting here listening and paying attention, and playing that against maybe where we came in with at the beginning of the evening. I always tell new trustees, and I remind the old ones, that you don't make up your mind until it's time to raise your hand and vote. So, and I'm sure that's what is going on this evening with all 6 of my colleagues up here. So I guess the first question, and I want to just do a quick poll on this, you guys got the appetite to move this thing forward in any conversation? I see 2, 3, 4, 1 maybe not.
Well, I'm pretty vocal about, I'm
Yeah.
against the moratorium, so.
No, I'd like to continue discussion, Chris.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that you guys got the appetite to work through this, because there is a bit of work that we need to do, so. I have some things I'd like to throw out on the table. You know, matter of fact, Rob, I'll let you talk to the permit, because I spoke with Rob Apatoff last night, and he came up with what I thought was a really good idea for the individuals that are in limbo, as Mrs. Levinson stated. So go ahead.
Sure. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I'll speak personally. I have a lot of friends that live in the lake, and we've had long discussions about this, and it is not to penalize the people who are trying to do the right thing, period.
Hmm.
You're obviously trying to do the right thing. That said and done, to put, I think at least the last time we discussed this, the council unanimously said we can't just excuse certain things to not go through the process that we're asking everybody else to go through. But instead of waiting 9 months, 6 months, whatever it's going to be, to bring we have a coastal engineer on board. He's excellent. To get instead of waiting for these 3 projects, get them in front of our coastal engineer so you can move ahead with expediency as much as we can grant, so you're not in limbo. And but we still have the checks and balances that we're trying to put in to make sure no damage will come. So if we can pull that off or add that to the list for your 3, the 3 that I think are already in, I think that's, to me at least, a fair compromise.
So why don't we start the discussion off there? What do you guys think?
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I agree. Huh, it was too easy.
No, it brings common sense and.
Yeah, no, but I think there's problems with the moratorium just to begin with. So obviously, anything that can make it easier for people in process, because by the time somebody submitted a permit, they probably have spent a year or more of studies and things, and I think that's only fair.
So, Bob, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think that's a good idea, Chris. Thank you.
Okay. Anticipating that my colleagues would be amenable to that, I did ask the village attorney to put together some language which would allow those 3 permits to go through an application that also requires that those permit applications go through a secondary review with our coastal engineer, just to make sure he has eyes on it. And if he evaluates the particular application and sees that it poses an imminent and long-lasting danger to the bluff, he's to raise those, and then that will have to wait till the end of the abeyance period. However, if he looks at what you're doing and he doesn't see anything that would be negatively impacting in the zone, and we're talking long-standing, not during construction, that then we could go ahead and process and issue those permits. So there's language here, but you don't want me reading it, that's for sure. And but it basically says that, if I'm not mistaken. So why don't we let these folks read what Peter has done? And
Trustee Dearborn, I emailed it to you.
I just don't want to read the damn thing.
I know.
So, yeah, I will ultimately. But basically, the important thing here is the prohibition does not apply to pending applications or pending application permits. So at least the three that are in limbo, as you said before, will find their way out as long as the coastal engineer is on board with it. So we aren't, now it's our turn.
This is a point of clarification.
Sure.
I let my bluff stabilize. I was told by my engineer.
It's our time to talk with each. I want to hear what you have to say, but we're in the deliberation phase of the evening.
Yeah, but I think this is critical. I think under Robert's rules, I have the right to put it.
You're the chair, you can decide.
No, we've taken public comment. I'm sorry. It's 9 o'clock, and then finally we get to roll up our sleeves and do our work up here. So we're talking about the 3 permits that are in process, and those are the ones we're going to be dealing with outside of the abeyance. Does that make sense?
Chris,
Okay,
the 3 are the Levinsons shoring up phase 2 of their bluff, and the pool that we're aware of. What's the third?
There's a
project?
sidewalk down on the revetment on one property that he's got a gravel path there, and he wants to pour concrete.
They're all a little different, and our engineer can assess that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was one issue I wanted to get out of the way right away. You guys can look at that language as we move forward here. When we go on to number 2. The setback, the 40-foot setback was another one. And I'm open to conversation and discussion on that particular issue right now.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I suggest that we don't need a moratorium. I think we've heard ample testimony that people are making rational, reasonable investments into their bluff. I think as someone said, what we're really trying to preserve is to protect against bluff elimination. I don't think a single person here has expressed any desire to do that, and I do think it's kind of once in a generation sort of situation. But I do understand the concerns about doing work in the steep slope. I'm concerned about the definition of the steep slope area, that the ordinance applies to everything within the steep slope area, including 40 feet back, especially since we've had 2 meetings hearing that many people have houses, but also improvements in that area. And my concern is some of these improvements, I know some of these houses, they've been there for 80 years and they don't seem to have any bluff concerns. So I don't know if there's a rational basis for us to put a moratorium in place for 40 feet back from the top of the bluff. I think some of the suggestions we heard tonight are fantastic. Unlike the West Coast, we don't have earthquakes. And so because I did practice in Washington State, it's a much different situation because steep slope regulations there are very focused on, horrible things associated with earthquakes. But, stability, geotech, engineering, all those things I think we could probably pretty quickly put into an ordinance that, because it sounds like a lot of people are already doing that, right? They're engineering their improvements because they're making substantial investments into their properties. And when you spend $10 or $12 million and then you spend another $1 million on your improvements, you want to make sure it doesn't fall into the lake, right? So I have suggested, one, I would love to see no moratorium at all because I think fundamentally they're dangerous. They have a lot of unintended consequences. But if we can't get support for setting aside the concept of a moratorium, I think at a minimum we should exempt out the 40 feet buffer area. So that's my thoughts, and it's consistent with what I said last meeting. But I know I'm in the minority.
That's okay. Pick it up. Go ahead, Rob.
Again, I appreciate the comments. I've been hearing them not just in this room, but from others. I've also talked to other lakefront owners that are in agreement, so I'm trying to balance this. I do think it was important with some of the steps we put in to make sure that the lakefront owners aren't penalized by what we're trying to do to get a handle on this. It is a difficult one. More homes are being sold on the lakefront. There are properties that are going through now. And there are, now that this Band-Aid's been ripped off of what we saw, the bluff elimination, I think that's one of the reasons why I think there is action that's needed. But clearly, we don't want to, for the people who are doing the right thing, and we'll discuss what that right thing is. I mean, I think 90, the homeowners I know have done it, and that are concerned about this. Anything they have done, we would never have stopped, ever. Never would even consider it. But there are, we are the only ones in the North Shore that have nothing. And I think if you take a trip with a boat, from a boat looking at the shoreline from Evanston to Lake Bluff, Winnetka is startling of what's happened on this lakefront. Startling. And what it does mean, and we've seen this in other situations where people are moving to Winnetka because our ordinances are more lax, which usually is fine. And 95% of the time, the owners are trying to do the right thing. I couldn't agree more. All my friends are. But the ones that aren't, that's the problem, and that is truly compromising what's happening in the village. And that's what we want to protect, the people who are doing the right thing and encourage them and help them. If we want to shorten this a little bit, I'm okay with shortening the time.
What about the 40 feet?
That's a tough one, because I'm not married to 40. I know we had to pick something, and we picked the distance that is commonplace along the North Shore. But I agree. I mean, if I have if my sun porch or whatever is in the 40 feet, as you know, I think we're still saying you can improve things in this that's existing.
Right.
But
you can't expand.
But you can't expand. And we may bring this down to 20. It may be situational, as you said. I think we had to pick something that was based upon other regulations that are, we're not trying to copy any, but just as a starting point.
At least for the abeyance period.
Yeah, my guess is we will probably change it and narrow it more quickly. But I don't know what we really know.
Well, I'm just going to jump in. A couple things I forgot to mention. I am a lakefront owner on the other side of the lake, and I do understand the barge issue and the timing issue, and I think is a very well statement that we think of it as 9 months, but you're really looking at a 2-year delay for people. And I think we need to think about that, right? That's one thing. 2, I think we're better than everybody else, right? I don't know if 40 feet is really supported by any evidence, and to say, I know it's easy and it's a safe harbor for us to say, well, you know, Evanston and Highland Park have done 40 feet. I don't know if the evidence supports it. I don't know if there's a rational basis. And I think when we're talking about people's property rights, and I don't want to, it is not a blue or red issue, believe me, but when we're talking about changing what people expect when they purchase property and what they can do, I think you have to have a very reasoned approach, and it has to be narrowly tailored to address the concern. And the concern, what I've heard, is bluff elimination. And I'm concerned about anything to restrict in 40 feet, I think goes a little bit too far. So I won't say anything more.
Others?
To continue on to what Bob was saying, some lakefront owners have gone down and seen it and said they wouldn't want the excavation or the elimination next to them once they saw it. They came into this with a different mindset, and then they went down and saw it and said, oh my God, I wouldn't want that to happen next to my house. So the idea behind this is to protect the harm against the people next to properties that would choose to do bad things. And when Bob talked about the Band-Aid being ripped off, there is concern who's coming in next, who says, well, it's easier to just bulldoze it and then build it back afterwards, but what changes during that period of time, not to mention the environment that's been bulldozed, but what changes around it. So it is interesting, because I do think that it is largely the excavation, although bluff protection is extremely important anyway. We do have it in the 2040 plan as a major feature of living in Winnetka, and we want to protect it for many reasons. I would be open to something less than 40 feet, because we do not, most the people that came to the meeting are people that have done work on their properties and have done things the right way and protected it, and
we don't want to impact negatively everybody that is doing the good work. Do we think that the maintenance and restoration and like the natural disaster language is enough to allow prophylactic bluff?
Actually, one of the sidebar conversations up here, village attorney, if you guys will look at page 281 of 400 of our agenda packet, section 17.80.040 exceptions. And the first one, in item A, it currently reads repair or general maintenance for structures existing as of July 6th. We could put in there repairs or general maintenance for bluffs and structures existing, so that they would have the ability to do bluff improvement, bluff stabilization, and take care of their property in a manner they see fit.
That would be good.
So does that work? I mean,
like that.
oh, we lost Bob.
Wait, Bob.
Am I not here?
Oh, we hear you, we just don't see you.
Turn your lights on, man.
I don't know what to say.
Hey, Bob, it's really weird having you look right at me for the whole meeting, I gotta tell you.
Chris, sorry about that. I think that sounds fine.
But the sound isn't the problem, it's the picture.
We can hear him.
Well, come on, Kristen.
It's actually better this way.
I turn into a pumpkin at 9, so I'm sorry. That makes sense, though, the 4 bluffs, okay. I got it. Peter's got that.
But Chris, on that, and Peter, I mean, to the point that one of the main concerns is bluff excavation. Should it be clear that it's structural engineering in support of the existing bluff and not excavation? I mean,
Well, it's repair and general maintenance, Bob, not new construction.
Okay, but of the in shoring up the bluff, and I understand, I thought the points were made very clearly, and they're good points, that people have issues along the way. They need to restore their bluffs to keep a problem from happening. I think that's a great point.
Right.
We just want to make sure that it doesn't involve excavating what's there to do that.
Yeah, I guess that's my other concern. In there was a comment that was brought up, I'm going to make it stronger. Well, I trust he believes that. I just don't know if that's the purpose of what we're trying to do. I mean, you can justify that for anything. I think we're trying to get away from that, if you're looking at the 2040 plan as well.
This is repairs or general maintenance.
That's great.
though.
No,
I mean,
I'm all for this.
It's not
Okay.
new construction or an alteration of something that, this is definitely under the, repairs and maintenance.
I am all for letting
And-
homeowners protect.
We could spend a lot of time trying to define it, but if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I think staff will know when there's a duck at the table, okay, so. Unless you want to
So
spend the
Chris,
time
would that
trying
need to be permitted? Would that general maintenance of the bluff restaurant, would that need to be permitted through the staff? And would you run that by our coastal engineer or not?
You lakefront owners, when you go in for your revetments and stuff like that, does that generally require permits?
Yes.
Okay, so we wouldn't be changing that. I mean, you still have to go through that pain, obviously, but at least you'd be able to do the work if you were to do that sort of thing, so,
Yeah,
right?
common sense. That's good.
We all looking okay on that? Okay. What else? Anybody else have any suggestions or comments?
I just have a couple general comments.
Sure.
I appreciate what everybody said tonight, and certainly we continue to learn about what's happening with lakefront owners. I heard several times tonight, though, almost all lakefront owners do the right thing. Almost all of us have done, and to Rob's point, it's not the ones that are, all of you who are sitting here tonight who have done the right things, and I've seen several of the properties, and they're fantastic in that regard. It's the ones that aren't, or the new owners that might not necessarily want to take the right approach. That's one of the reasons we want to really take this time to understand. We've also heard that every property is unique. One of the reasons I guess I'm supportive of this abeyance and the time period to really look at this properly is to get the right experts in and not do this piecemeal, not just rush to say we should do this engineering standard or demand this coastal study, but really come up with what is right for Winnetka and what might be right for all the different unique properties we have. I really don't want to do this piecemeal, and nor do I want to do a cookie cutter approach of copying what other communities have. Again, we're unique. However, when it comes to the 40 feet, I know that for just the abeyance, abeyance doesn't necessarily translate into what would come out at the end of 9 months. The 40 feet is a benchmark that other communities near us have used. I think, as you mentioned, Chris, our coastal engineer also said that would be a conservative distance to use. You know, rather than just throw a dart at a dartboard and pick another number, I guess I feel that that has some logic to it, which is why I would support the 40 feet.
So I'm not hearing a big argument for other numbers. During the week I did, but I'm not hearing them tonight, so. I personally think 40 feet is a big grab. I'm not voting, so I don't really have a dog in the fight yet, unless you guys can't agree.
But Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, within the 40 feet, it would only be disturbing existing open soil. Any structures that are on the 40 feet, if they're 10 feet from the toe, or they're a pool or whatever, an office, any of that can be repaired within the footprint. What am I missing on this?
That's correct. That's right.
That is correct, Bob.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just no new building within that zone, I guess, is what we're saying.
Okay. Other thoughts?
One thought I had, by the way, and I would like Rob Bahan to comment on this, on the time frame, the 9 months. You know, Rob, we kind of talked about it at one point, I think, whether or not, you had the capacity with staff and so on to get this done, and, by the end of January or something like that. Is there any way to tighten this up in your view? I know we can try to move faster, and then it doesn't have to be 9 months if we get it done sooner, but can we tighten up the time frame and not put your group through, a terrible rigor?
Thanks, Bob. I don't think it'd be a terrible rigor. It's just a matter of what priorities are going to be balanced, right? So there's a finite amount of time. If the council wants to reduce this to 6 months, we will make that work accordingly. But there might be a project or two that doesn't get the attention because we need to accelerate this. So I would say it's doable, but it's certainly the council's purview.
Yeah, and I'm personally not in favor of shortening it. I think we can do the work in less than 9 months, but I don't want to have a gun to my head while we're doing it. Because
Okay.
then we're gonna end up with rush fever and get it done, and oh God, we gotta finish before this. I mean, I think we have every intent on attacking this probably in September with a study session, and then seeing where it goes from there. We could be done by the end of the year, but we have the budget coming up, and that's a big push for staff as well as for village council, and then we have all the work that comes after that to get us to the finish line for December. So, we could be done January, February very easily. But to force that, especially in view of all the other things we have on our plate, I think would be a press. It would really be a press, because we have to find agenda time for it. We're already meeting three times a month, plus our other meetings.
I think with all the exceptions we've added to this to try and relieve the homeowners from any type of burden, as much as we can, I think that hopefully will help if you want to tape that 9 months. But, we're trying to include everything we can to make it easier and not penalize anybody.
Anybody else on the 9 months? 6 months? We've already heard
I
you.
just think you guys, I think we could decide in a month that any permit for any lakeshore property you could have a geotechnical study, a slope stability study. I don't know what we need for 9 months. I mean.
That's the problem. Neither do I,
Yeah.
and neither does anybody else here know. We have to get smart so we don't start doing stupid things, and that's why we need time, so that we can get the education we need to make good decisions.
But it's gonna be a site-by-site examination when it comes down to it anyway, so.
Don't know that.
I've said my piece on this one.
Thank you.
Others?
No.
Okay, one last thing, and I'm doing this just for my own edification, but hopefully people here will listen to this. in this ordinance, you have all these recitals that tell us why, how we can do things and why we should do things. And it usually states the purpose of what we're doing this exercise for. And in this particular ordinance, and I picked this up this afternoon as I was, just reviewing for the meeting, it says, whereas the village plans to retain the services of a coastal engineer, hold public meetings and hearings, and develop a more comprehensive amendment to the village code and provide related procedures to ensure that construction on the bluffs and the steep slope areas of the bluffs are consistent with the village's goals and policies. Well, it's the people in the room that help us form these policies. And right now, we don't have one at all. And that's what we're trying to get our head wrapped around here, is how we form policies that are consistent with what the village wants. And the village isn't these 7 people up here. The village is everybody in this room and everybody who decided to stay home and watch whatever's on TV tonight. So we aren't looking to overreach and stomp on people's property rights. We just want the time to study this and to do it right. I don't like these moratoriums either. I mean, and I'm in Tina's camp with that, but I also recognize that given the work that we have in front of us, that doing it in a hasty manner could prove to be far less beneficial than us doing it in a thoughtful, educated manner. So all I can do at this point is, as we vote on this thing, and if it does pass, which I have a sneaking suspicion it will with the modifications, that the community just give us the chance and the trust that we aren't going to screw up your property values. We aren't going to hurt your ability to do things. But what we are concerned about, and folks, we've seen this time and time and time again in this village, it isn't all the homeowners here who are residents who care about their property, but we've seen it in the tree streets for the last 20 years. Now all of a sudden we're seeing it in the R3 and the R2 properties, where developers are buying larger properties, combining them into much larger properties, and then turning around, building a large product on that, and then turning around to the marketplace to support their activities. They're profiteers in our community. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how people make their living. But the fact of the matter is we as homeowner residents in this community have a much higher investment because we're here for the long haul, whereas the profiteers are in here to come in and get out. And I would challenge any homeowner to go over to the Ishbias, and they're going to be homeowners, but tell me if that's something you would want to live with in its current state for the next 2 or 3 years of your life. And that's what we're trying to help with, is we're trying to help so that people don't have to deal with that sort of issue. Or maybe the community comes to the table when we have our study sessions and they say, we don't care. Let Leo build all over the lakefront as much as he wants. Let him consolidate 5 acres at a crack, and we'll let it go. But I don't think that's what this community wants. That's not what I've heard from a lot of the people that I've talked to. And so it requires us to kind of move in a very slow, deliberate, and educated manner. And I'm just asking for everybody's faith and trust that we aren't going to do the wrong thing up here. We're going to be smart about it. You can see the way we're debating this evening. It's only going to get tougher when we get down to the table, and you guys will be there with us. So, can somebody up here sum up what we just did and let me ask for an ordinance? Go ahead, Peter.
So, I'm on. So the ordinance is up for adoption. If there's a motion to approve, the motion to approve should be to approve the ordinance and adopt it subject to 2 changes. One would be subject to the changes to section 17.80.030, subsections A and B, which is the handout that was provided. And then the second would be to amend section 17.80.040, which is the exceptions, to add the language that the village president said, which would be would explicitly provide that repairs or general maintenance for bluffs or for structures existing as of July 6, 2023 could proceed during the abeyance period. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
So those two,
Those
the
two.
insert of the bluffs and this language here.
Correct.
Motion with those changes.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move here. Say again, Kim?
Who took notes on what to say there?
Just need a motion, just so.
Okay,
moved.
so here we go. I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number MC 08-2023 with the modifications that the village attorney just reviewed.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Handler.
Yes?
Trustee Apatow.
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman.
No.
Trustee Albinson.
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn.
Yes.
Trustee Orsick.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. That'll end that. Okay, folks, I just finished 2 bottles of this, so I need to take a 5-minute break. Okay, will we be moving forward? Where did, oh, I need my village manager. That's okay. I keep looking over here, looking for Bob, and he's always in the wrong place. Okay. Our next ordinance is ordinance number M09-2023, amending the official zoning map of the Village of Winnetka to place certain property along Lake Michigan in the Lakefront Preservation Overlay District. Amendment of the text of the Winnetka zoning ordinance to establish a lakefront preservation overlay district requires the amendment of the official zoning map to place certain property along the Lake Michigan in the lakefront preservation overlay district. Ugh. And our Community Development Director, David, is here to run us through this one.
Very quickly, you have two amendments on your agenda. One, two ordinances, I should say. One creates the overlay district, becomes part of our zoning ordinance. The other one then applies that district to specific properties along the lake. As a reminder, these are all publicly owned properties. When the ordinance, I guess, kicks into these properties is when any of these publicly owned properties are no longer publicly owned. Then they have a new set of land use standards that they need to adhere to. Again, that only happens when these publicly owned properties are no longer publicly owned. Again, the village attorney has reviewed the written protests that were submitted for this. And again, the protests submitted did not meet the 20% threshold. Therefore, the council can adopt the ordinance by 4 council members voting in the affirmative if the council so desires. Be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions after last week's, Bob? Okay. I'll open this up for public comment then. Would anybody like to speak on this item? Come on up. You get a 2 for tonight.
Just very quickly, two things I would just ask. For this and for the others, one batch of comments maybe for the rest of these. We would like to know the actual numbers of things that were submitted because, as we said earlier, pretty much every single lakefront owner seems to have been on an email trail over this last week and rushed every way they could to get things filed for whichever ones they believed in. So it doesn't help us to see it didn't pass. We really would just like to know the numbers. In fact, I've done our own calculations because there are 70 people on the email trail, and it looked to a lot of people that depending on what you chose as a denominator, it actually would have been a significant number. So I just, in gratitude to the people who actually spent their 4th of July week to get things notarized and into you, it would be nice in the record if you could actually put the actual number.
Sure.
That would be helpful. And the numerator and denominator. And second, just for these and the other ordinances, I would just like some statement on the record that, and you said it last time, the intention is not to devalue any of the neighboring properties. I understand all the things behind it, but I would just like some sort of statement on the record of intent, because we are next to the end of the road on Willow. We try to maintain it and make it all, seamless and natural. But you could read some of the things about trees and blocking views. There's no view to block. We just want to make sure that intent is clear in whatever you pass. Thank you.
By the way, you understand that the protest doesn't stop our deliberation.
Oh, I understand, but
it just means that at least 4 trustees have to vote yes. That's all. It takes me out of the equation.
No, completely understand. My only point
was
I'd be
a lot of people, to be honest with you.
A lot of people rush to get things in. I think they just want to know the numbers. It's
sure.
It's a fairly numerate crowd here in Winnetka, and we can count to 88 homes. We'd like to count to the number of things that are in there. I think that's just what people are looking for. So
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. And I'll just move right to ask for a motion on this to adopt ordinance number M09-2023.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Orsic?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Albinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Next item is ordinance number MC09-2023, amending the text of the Winnetka zoning ordinance regarding amendments to special uses. Is that right? Wait a minute. Did I jump one?
The map,
This is
What we just did was M07, right?
I give up.
Was the text amendment creating the land, so you just did A, now you do B. You just did A, now you do B.
I hate this job. I love the work, but I hate these meetings. I'm sorry, this is really hard.
So let me just
So
clarify. So
what did
you
we just vote on?
You just passed and adopted ordinance MC 07-2023, amending the zoning ordinance to create the overlay district. Now you're doing B, which is amending the official zoning map.
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped one page ahead,
Yep.
okay, I'm sorry, folks. It's almost 10 o'clock and that's not good. Okay, we're looking at ordinance number M09-2023, right?
Correct.
Amending the official zoning map of the Village of Winnetka to place certain property along Lake Michigan in the Lakefront Preservation Overlay District. David, you want to go ahead and? David has nothing else for this? This is just the tack onto the other one.
Right.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, public comment on this? Seeing none? May I have a motion to adopt ordinance number M09-2023?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote?
Trustee Albinson?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
That motion carries. I knew I wasn't going crazy. 1 second, folks.
Now D?
When I reordered the amendment, we lost one of the intros, so let me go back on this then. Okay, we've done E.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we've done C,
Yes.
we've done A,
Yes.
and we've done B.
Correct.
So now we do D.
That's the maximum or minor major one.
But wait a minute, here's the problem. I'm sorry, folks, there's a clerical issue going on here that we have to resolve. Oh. But I stated it correctly. So we actually are on D, which confusingly is MC09-2023, amending the text of the Winnetka zoning ordinance regarding amendments to special use, and this is up for adoption. David, do you have anything you want to say on this? That's, okay, I get it. Yeah.
Just, again, this is making a code amendment to make changes to our definition of when a change to a special use is major or minor. This text amendment applies to every property in the community because every zoning district has special uses. Therefore, it had a very high standard to meet the 20%. So again, the village attorney has reviewed the submitted protest, and the protest did not meet the 20% threshold for this ordinance.
Gotcha, thank you. Any questions or conversation on this item? Seeing none, would anybody like to have a public comment on this item? Special uses. Seeing none, I will ask the board for someone to provide me a motion for ordinance number MC09-2023, amending the text of the Winnetka zoning ordinance regarding amendments to special uses.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Albinson?
Yes. That motion carries. Sorry for the confusion. We're done with ordinances. We'll move forward, and yeah, we all should cheer. Item 11 on the agenda is appointments. I have an appointment for the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners, appointing Julian Solotarovsky to a full term which will expire on July 18th, 2026. Julian is replacing Wes Bauman, who was here earlier and who's done a yeoman's job for many, many, many years in this position and has served this village in an unbelievable manner, not only at his work at New Trier, but here at the village, and really helped out quite a lot with that. We all appreciate his service greatly. So may I have a motion to appoint Julian Solotarovsky to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You're lucky, Julian, nobody even challenged you, so.
Good time.
Oh, I could do this forever. Okay, item 12, closed session, there is none, and item 13, adjournment. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Bob, good to seeing you.
Thanks, Chris.
See
So
you,
long,
Bob.
everybody. So long.